What if it works out? Not what if it fails, not what if you embarrass yourself, not what if people laugh. What if it actually works out? I want you to sit with that for a second. Because I think most of us, especially people our age, people who grew up watching the world change faster than we could keep up, we spend so much mental energy preparing for the worst that we never really let ourselves imagine the best. Like, genuinely imagine it. Not just as a passing daydream before you fall asleep, but as a real possible outcome. What if this time it works? I remember being 19. I had this idea. Nothing revolutionary, just something I believed in. A small business, a side hustle, whatever you want to call it. I'd been watching people online build things from scratch, people not much older than me, and I kept thinking, I could do that. I have something to say, I have something to offer, but I didn't start. Not for months. I'd open my laptop, get halfway through setting something up, and then this voice would show up. You know the one. That quiet, reasonable-sounding voice that says, but what if it doesn't work? And the thing is, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like wisdom. Like I was being mature, responsible. Like I was just being realistic. I told myself I was waiting until I was ready, until I knew more, until the timing was right, and the timing was never right. Looking back, I wasn't being wise. I was just scared. And I dressed the fear up in logic so I wouldn't have to admit that. Here's something about our generation that I think about a lot. We grew up with access to everything. Information, tutorials, success stories, failure stories, all of it, all the time, right there in our pockets. And in a weird way, that's made starting harder, not easier. Because when you can see every possible outcome before you even begin, when you can read every Reddit thread about why something failed, watch every video about what went wrong, you start to feel like you already know how your story ends, before you've even written the first page. Gen Z, the new generation coming up, we are arguably the most informed, most connected, most aware generation that has ever existed, and yet there's this quiet epidemic of paralysis, of watching, of preparing endlessly, of almost starting. We are a generation of almost. And I say that with love. Because I lived it. There was a period in my early 20s where I was genuinely obsessed with learning. Finance, psychology, business, self-improvement. I consumed it all. Podcasts in the morning, books at night, YouTube during lunch. I felt like I was doing something, like I was making progress. But I wasn't building anything. I was just filling my head. Mistaking input for output, mistaking education for action. I had a mentor, not a formal one, just an older guy I knew, someone who'd actually built a business from nothing. And he said something to me that I still think about. He said, "You keep trying to gain knowledge like it's armor, but armor doesn't move. You have to." That hit differently than I expected, because he was right. I was using learning as a shield. If I kept studying, kept preparing, I could justify not acting. I could tell myself I just wasn't ready yet. And nobody could argue with that because, hey, I was being responsible, I was doing my research, but research doesn't build anything. Movement does. So I started. Finally. Not perfectly, not confidently. I started the way most honest starts happen, awkwardly, with my stomach in knots, with this constant feeling like I was about to be found out. And something happened that I didn't expect. It didn't immediately fail. That sounds small, but it wasn't. Because everything in my mind had been so catastrophically pointed toward failure that even mediocre results felt like a revelation. I made my first small win. Nothing dramatic, nothing life-changing. And I sat there thinking, oh, this is actually possible. Not guaranteed, not easy, but possible. And that shift from this probably won't work to this could actually work, that was everything. That was the whole game. That's the thing nobody tells you about taking action. The first reward isn't success, it's possibility. the feeling that the door is open, that the path is real. I want to talk about money for a second because this channel lives at the intersection of life and finance, and I think the same fear that stops people from starting a business, starting a project, starting anything, it's the same fear that keeps people from building financial lives that actually belong to them. People our age are terrified of getting it wrong with money. And listen, that's reasonable. The stakes are real. But that fear has convinced an entire generation to do nothing, to keep their savings in accounts earning almost zero, to avoid investing because what if the market crashes, to avoid starting a business because what if it fails, and in trying so hard not to lose, they never really try to gain. There's something cruel about that, because time is the one resource that genuinely doesn't come back. Every year you wait to start investing, to start building, to start anything. That's compounding working against you instead of for you. Not in some dramatic, devastating way, just quietly, slowly, the way opportunities drift past while you're still deciding whether or not to reach for them. I'm not saying be reckless. I'm not saying throw your savings at something because you watched a video and felt inspired. What I'm saying is this: the cost of inaction is just as real as the cost of a bad decision. It just doesn't feel as sharp, it comes later, and it comes quietly, and by the time you feel it, you've already lost years to it. Don't stop to act, keep moving, imperfectly sometimes, but moving. Something I've learned is that the people who build things, real things, not just dreams, they don't have better ideas than everyone else. They're not smarter. They're not more talented. The main difference I've noticed over and over is this: they have a higher tolerance for the uncertain middle, that space between starting and succeeding, that gray zone where nothing is confirmed, where the outcome is still open, where you're doing the work but the results aren't there yet. Most people can't stay in that space. It's uncomfortable. It feels like failure that just hasn't been confirmed yet. But it's not. It's just the process. The new generation, and I mean this sincerely, not as some motivational poster line, the new generation has more tools than any group of young people in history. More access, more platforms, more ways to build an audience, start a business, learn a skill, connect with the right people. The infrastructure for success has never been more available to someone starting from nothing, and yet we're still waiting, still preparing, still asking, but what if it doesn't work? What if you flipped that question? Not as a naive act of positivity, not as some affirmation you say in the mirror, but as a genuine intellectual exercise. What if you sat down right now and seriously mapped out what your life looks like if this works? Not just vaguely, specifically. What does your day look like? What does your bank account look like? What does your freedom look like? Because here's what I've noticed. When people are afraid to start, they have a very detailed, vivid picture of what failure looks like. They can narrate it. They've played it out in their head 100 times. The embarrassment, the loss, the "I told you so" from whoever they're afraid of disappointing. But the success scenario, it's blurry, undefined, almost abstract. And you can't move towards something you can't see. So make it real. Make the good outcome as detailed as the bad one. Give your hope the same mental real estate you've been giving your fear. I think about this generation a lot. Not with worry, with something more like quiet respect, actually. Because I know what it's like to grow up in a world that feels uncertain. To be handed a set of rules that the generation before you wrote, only to realize those rules don't quite apply anymore. To feel like you're navigating without a map. That's not weakness, that's the actual condition of being young and awake right now. But here's what I want you to understand. That uncertainty, that lack of a clear path, that is not a wall. It is an opening. When the map doesn't exist, whoever starts drawing it first gets to decide where things are. That's the position you're in. That's the position we're in. The people who win in that environment aren't the most qualified. They're the most willing to begin. So I'll leave you here, quietly. Not with a list, not with a 5-step plan, just with the question, what if it works out? What if the thing you've been sitting on, the idea, the project, the investment, the leap, what if it actually goes well? What if a year from now you're grateful you started today? What if the version of you that exists 5 years from now needed you to act right now, and you just couldn't see it yet? You don't have to be certain, you don't have to be ready, you just have to be willing to find out. Start imperfectly, start scared, start small if you have to, but start. Because the only question worth being afraid of isn't what if it fails, it's what if it worked and you never tried.